You know who stood up for religious freedom in his day? Bill Clinton, the U.S. president and the husband of the would-be next U.S. president, Hillary Clinton. In 1993, he signed into law something called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It passed overwhelmingly in the U.S. Congress, both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, the final vote in the Senate was 97-3. It was actually sponsored by a liberal New York Democrat named Chuck Schumer. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act says a few important things, and I'll just read from it here. It says that the government may not substantially burden a person's exercise of religion, which means the government can't stop you from praying or doing something religious. And if the government has to do it, the law requires the government to use the least restrictive means and only for a compelling governmental interest, which says that there may be some instance where the government can stop you from practicing your religion, but only if there's an important reason and if they use the least invasive means possible. Now, why did the government bring in this law? Why did Bill Clinton stand up for religious freedom in 1993? Well, there was a case involving some drug rehab counselors who were Aboriginal and followed an Aboriginal spirituality, that they chewed on peyote, and they were fired because the people who fired them said, well, you're violating our anti-drug rules by chewing on your peyote. And these Aboriginals said, no, that's part of our spirituality. So this was brought in with the support of the left to protect, I suppose, minority religions like Aboriginal peyote chewers. And over the years, it was used to protect people who had long hair for religious reasons, or used other, it had ceremonial daggers, for example. The left loved this law, and Bill Clinton did too, because it protected minority religious groups from being picked on. The ACLU loved it. Now, that was 1993, and since that time, 19 U.S. states have brought in almost identical versions of this law too, with the support of the U.S. left. But then something happened the last few years, really. Christians started using this law too. For example, the big hobby chain store called Hobby Lobby tried to use this act to say that they shouldn't be forced to offer contraception to their employees under Obamacare. Their religious beliefs meant they did not want to. I don't know the exact details of what they did or didn't want to do. All I'm saying is they opposed Obamacare using this law. And the left started to turn against this law because it was only in their favor when it was for cool little alternative religions or spirituality. This certainly wasn't meant to protect big white Christians. Well, the left had a total freak out this month when Indiana became the 20th U.S. state to follow Bill Clinton's lead and to bring in an identical state-level law. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, even wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post condemning Indiana for bringing in this law. Tim Cook and others have said this law is just a Trojan horse to pick on gays. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth does a law protecting religious freedom have to do with picking on gays? Tim Cook himself is a gay, and he says he was, in fact, raised Christian, so he's both, he says. Well, this law could theoretically protect, say, a Christian baker from having to make a pro-gay marriage, same-sex marriage wedding cake. That's the theoretical example. And this law would say, well, there really is no compelling interest to force this baker to decorate a gay wedding cake. You're violating their Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Sikh or Hindu beliefs, so you can't force that baker to make a same-sex marriage wedding cake. That's really the issue, the example that's being used. And Tim Cook is so mad that he, on behalf of Apple, has not only written an op-ed in the Washington Post about it, but has said that they're going to boycott certain events in Indiana. Now, that's sort of weird because literally last year, Tim Cook's Apple opened up business in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doesn't just say you don't have to bake a same-sex wedding cake if you don't want. They actually make it illegal to be gay. it is against the Quran to be homosexual, and other Middle Eastern countries in which Apple does business happily are violent towards gays, stone them, lash them, hang them. Why was Tim Cook against an Indiana law that says nothing about homosexuality, that only protects individual exercise of freedom of religion? Why is he against that in Indiana, but has nothing to say about the treatment of sexual minorities or any other minorities in Saudi Arabia? And it reminds me, all this Sturm und Drang, all this sound and fury over Indiana's law, of which there are 19 other states with the same law, and that Bill Clinton himself introduced, and that has nothing to say about gays. It just allows people to practice their religion their own way. Why the rage over that, but the silence over John Kerry literally today meeting with Iran to sign a deal letting them build nuclear weapons? Iran prefers to kill gays by hanging them from the neck from construction cranes. Where is the gay outrage there? Where's Tim Cook's op-ed on that? The Keystone XL pipeline. Why do liberals oppose that pipeline and prefer to import OPEC oil from gay hanging, gay bashing, misogynist, anti-labor union OPEC countries? Why? It reminds me of the boycott of Stolichnaya vodka, because Vladimir Putin brought in some anti-gay laws. I do not support Vladimir Putin or his anti-gay laws, but there was such a fury amongst gay activists to go after Stolichnaya vodka, which just happens to be based in Finland. It's not in Russia. But why this anger over a small infraction by Putin and total silence in the face of Saudi and Iranian and other Sharia jurisdictions that actually murder gays? I don't understand it. I believe in equality for gays. I mean, how could I not? I believe in equality for all people before the law. But I don't understand how respecting a gay man or woman's rights translates into forcing someone to say something they don't believe in. I don't think that gay rights means forcing a Christian to violate his Christian rights. Is that what this whole struggle has been about? Is that what the centuries and decades of gay equality has been about? Not about expressing yourself, but forcing others to say they agree or condone you? Is that really what it's about? That sounds like someone who was bullied for years now has the stick in their hand and they want to do a little bullying by themselves. What possible national or personal or liberty interest is there in forcing someone to decorate a cake in a way they don't want to do? And how on earth does that possibly take away from your rights? I find this a misunderstanding of liberty and a misunderstanding of equality. And I go back to Bill Clinton's 1993 law to say, let someone practice their own religion in their own way. I got one last question for you. Do you think the shoe would work on the other foot? Do you think if an anti-gay church were to call up a gay bake shop and say, I demand a cake saying no same-sex marriage, or Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, do you think that the courts or Tim Cook would be outraged if the gay bakery said, no thanks, we don't believe in that? Of course not. And of course the obvious example would be, do you think that the courts or Tim Cook would ever go on their gay rights jihad against a Muslim bakery? No, I don't think so either. I don't think this is actually a pro-gay campaign at all. I think it's an anti-Christian campaign. And I think gay libertarians would agree with me. For the Rebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.